yourselves, and why don't you go first?
Yeah, so my name is Kimberly Spencer. I am a senior manager of an RFP team in our company. Our company is GoGuardian. I would be in the educational technology sector.
And so how big is the team that you manage?
My team is 6 writers, and we have independent contractors coming in and out as needed. For those RFP busy seasons.
Yeah, and that's probably a comparable size to a lot of the small and mid-sized companies that we see in our audience here. So I'm Tracy Argandona, and I'm the director of the Proposal Development Center at Guidehouse, a consulting firm. And so we're on the larger end of the spectrum. So we have about 16,000 employees now. Our proposal development center and proposal graphic design team makes up a team of about 55 to 60 people. Got a few openings right now. So our role is really to support the priority pursuits of the organization. We're not staffed to support every proposal request that comes in the door. So we have to focus on the ones that are the higher priorities, higher dollar values, et cetera. And our proposal graphic design team. So it's sort of interesting the way we're set up. All of our graphic designers roll up under the marketing team to our chief marketing officer. The proposal center staff, all of our proposal managers, coordinators, desktop publishers, and editors, they fall under me and the proposal design development center, and we roll up to the chief growth officer. So our graphic designers who support proposals are sort of part of our team on a dotted line, which adds another layer of complexity in terms of prioritizing and finding your resources.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I think that's a great point, even for this. So especially, like I said, we have 6 proposal writers. It is the smaller to mid-market proposal team. And proposal teams, like we'll cover in this presentation, can kind of fall under a wide range of organizational structures. And it does vary from company to company. We happen to report up to strategy and competitive intel under a revenue organization. And it was the first time I'd ever reported like to revenue specifically, rather than like a sales or marketing organization structure. So wherever you find your teams reporting up to, we'll cover like some of the important questions you can ask, and really so that you can kind of tailor the things, the value you get out of this presentation to your specific organization structure, proposal team size, etc.
Right. So regardless of the size, there are 4 key things that we're going to talk about today that really can help you figure out how to structure your team, how to prioritize your services, and how to prove your value. So let's go to the table of contents, and I'll talk through these 4 steps. So the first thing that you want to do as a new leader, or even as you're a current leader, kind of taking some time to take stock of how your team's doing, identify your services, clarify what your team does or does not do. This will help cut through the noise of all of the requests that seem to come out of left field, or maybe not really are the best fit for your team. We'll get into this a bit more. Then you want to determine your model. What sort of services are you committed to providing? Is there some sort of tiered model that you might want to provide? Are there certain pursuits that are going to take priority? Are there other services that your team provides beyond proposal support? What is it that your team's going to do, and what is it that you're going to ask the staff to do themselves? Then we're going to talk a bit about how you can develop your staff by helping them to enhance and build their skills. And then finally, we'll talk about how we evaluate success, how you decide as a team how you're doing and how you prove it. So let's start with identifying services and talk about a little bit about what value your team provides. So Kimberly, when people ask you, so what do you do? How do you answer that question?
Yeah. So my response to that is like I lead a strategy team, and we build out competitive responses to solicitations from school districts.
That's pretty cool work. So you get to really contribute to people who are helping educate our next generation of leaders, and that's a really valuable service. One of the things that gets me excited about my work here at Guidehouse is, yes, we help our experts sell, lots and lots of money in services every year so that we can keep these people busy with plenty of work that they love to do. But some of it is so meaningful. And, there's a couple submittals we're working on right now for the Veterans Administration that just really have the potential to have such amazing impacts on people's lives. And, while I think about when I talk to my family and they ask, what do you do for a living? And I say, I manage a proposal team. Like, they don't really know what that means. So I have different ways of responding to that. And sometimes I talk about the work our company does and the impact that we have on that, our ability to help contribute to keeping people employed so they can keep doing the work they love. We keep the company compliant with government laws and regulations so that we keep ourselves out of trouble. But we also help provide opportunities for staff to grow. And, I want to just encourage you all to sort of think about what you do more in terms of the value you provide both to your coworkers as well as to your staff, and not just thinking about, the day-to-day fact that we all do proposals, because really we all know this job is a lot more than that. And by the way, we like winning, and that's part of it too.
Definitely.
So the next thing you want to look at is what sort of deliverables is your team expected to support? Because the way you're going to structure your team, manage and prioritize your resources is going to depend really on what part of the company you're contributing to. And just for 3 examples, I think most of us who are here and involved in the PI community are here because we're involved in the world of proposals, and they might be government or commercial. You may do hard copy, you may do orals, you might support before the RFP with some capture activities, and you might support some after the RFP, not only lessons learned and debriefs, but also, helping to get work kicked off. Beyond the proposal world, many of the marketing teams are also involved in developing sales materials for their customers. They may help out with events, contribute to the company website, create brochures, support internal communications. There's a lot more that you can get involved in, and it's probably a bit easier to find the time for those things, or for the company to have the need for you to do those things if you're in a smaller or mid-sized company, just because in the larger companies, there's typically departments that do these other things. But I bring that up because it does make a difference. And whether you're hiring people, whether you're looking for a new position, it helps to know what those opportunities are, because some people are really into proposals and that's all they want to do. And they're not interested in the website or communications or anything like that. And they just want to do proposals all day long. And if you're looking at a company where you're expected to take on a broader role, then you sort of need to be aware of that. Similarly, if you're looking to hire people who have come from that broader background, I've found that it's best to just be upfront. If the role that you have open is really focused on proposals and they want something broader, don't try to hide that, because you're both just going to end up unhappy if you sort of mislead them about the fact that they'll have opportunities that in reality they won't have. Finally, a lot of proposal teams also get involved in client work. Most of the most detail-oriented, eagle-eyed editors and creative geniuses are in the proposal department. And of course, the client service teams want to borrow your time to help make your deliverables look as good as the proposals. But if you're doing that, you need to make sure you're looking at a few things, which is, are the proposal work going to be the priority, or is the billable work going to be the priority? you've got to kind of figure out what those lines are going to be and set them just so that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, I'll jump in really quickly. When I was doing some hiring, because I was the first proposal person hired at our company, and we really built the team out from there. And so when I was hiring people, I was really pretty quick to say, like, our company is young and growing and maturing. We're kind of in a teenager phase, right? Like, we're in an awkward phase, and people are wearing a lot of different hats, interacting with a lot of different departments. So we have growing pains. Sometimes our voice is changing.
Right.
And just being really upfront and honest with people about kind of the state of the overall company, and setting like some really baseline expectations of just kind of what they're walking into. Anyway, I found that a helpful analogy when we were hiring out for a team.
It's, you got to know what you're getting into. But at the same time, still expect things may change. And, that's sort of where I am right now. There's a certain set of services that the team that I've walked into has provided, and that's been proposal management, layout and production, and graphic design. We're building up a capability for editing, starting with copy editing, not really at the technical editing point yet. I'm hoping that as we grow, we'll be able to bring writing into that, because right now most of our consultant teams actually do the vast majority of all of the writing for our proposals, which is a switch from where I came from. The part of our business that does our commercial work, they actually have our proposal managers doing a lot of their contract reviews and even some of the legal reviews, because they don't have a dedicated contract staff on the commercial side. And so our proposal leaders, who have really been with that commercial part of the company for many, many years, they're familiar with a lot of the terms and conditions they need to look out for. They're familiar with a lot of the contract forms, and in many cases more than the partners running that business. And so they help keep an eye on those things too. But if you're working for a public sector group of clients, you're typically going to have a true contracts professional, possibly an attorney, handling those sort of legal and contractual reviews for you. I've seen in some large organizations, they even have pricing support. Sometimes they're part of the finance department, sometimes they're part of sales, sometimes they're part of the proposal and capture team. But just sort of getting a handle around what you're expected to provide, and what sort of skills are on the team. Kind of, it's really a mosaic of different services, and you're going to find that different people, as you hire, they're going to bring different skills from different places.
I'd like to hop in. We have a really good question, if y'all don't mind.
Sure.
Ben asks, should this be a tail wagging the dog situation, or the other way around? Would you recommend building services into your team and then offering them to the sales department, or having sales identify what they need and then building out your team from there? So where do you get started?
I think it's a combination of two things. So, your internal clients will tell you what they need often, and you'll have a good sense of what they need the most, because they're going to be complaining when they don't get it. And so, one example I have here, we don't have enough people to support desktop publishing, right? And so we've got people who, they know their proposal isn't high dollar enough that they're going to get a proposal manager, but they still want somebody to do the formatting. Sorry, we don't have enough for that either. It's, you want to support what you can, but at some point you're going to have to draw the line so that you don't end up burning out your people. And that is something I take very seriously. So, there are some things the sales team's going to ask for that you can and should offer. And I would say, in most proposal departments, those are going to be the writing, the editing, the graphics, the layout, the compliance reviews. I've had a lot of requests for us to do things like data entry into the CRM system. No, that's you. I've gotten requests for, contract support on federal work where that really needs to be done by somebody who can make sure the compliance is there and has that federal contracting background. There are people who ask about pricing, like I'm not your project manager. Don't ask me to estimate how many hours it's going to take you to get this work done. Like, I don't know. So, some of these things may be capabilities that you want to develop in your team. So, as one example in the past, we used to have to do a lot of proposals at my last job for huge remediation contracts that would span over 10 years. And for each one of those, they wanted an integrated master schedule done in Microsoft Project. And, there was always a line out the door of our scheduler's office, trying to get her to do all of her schedules. We would get to the end, there would always be somebody who realized, oh, I put the wrong name of the task in, or I need to change the date at the last minute because it doesn't match our milestone pricing schedule. And we would just need like small things to be done at the last minute. And, the scheduler wasn't available because they were whatever. So we did train up a couple of people on our team in Microsoft Project, not because we wanted to offer them as the new master scheduler, but just because we wanted to have that, backstop so people could make changes as needed. So, I think you need to listen to what they're asking for, but, make sure that you're only offering something that's reasonable within your team.
Yeah, I think to tail in on that, like at the end of the day, we are all at companies and the goal of the company is to make money. Like we are in this to sell a product or a service or something. So I think you could even back into that question a little bit, depending on where you're starting out at in that, where your proposal team's starting out at in that question is, and we'll go over some of the details in later slides, but what is most ROI? What has the biggest ROI?
Mhm.
Like, what contributes to making the dollars at the end of the day? And
That's
then
right.
back it out from that, right? Like if you don't have somebody who can do basic proposal management, like that is essential to winning, to getting a
Agreed.
proposal out the
100%.
door. And so I think you can kind of like back into it if you're starting at a very high level, maybe just starting out with a proposal team. It's something you can kind of back into as far as ROI, importance to our team, importance to other teams. And like I said, we'll cover more of those later on in the slides, but that would be my advice.
Any other questions, Catherine, as far as on this topic before we move into determining your model?
No, I think it seems like everybody's just really intently paying attention. But of course, we do welcome those questions. But I think Ben seems satisfied with the outcome of that answer. So, and I agree wholeheartedly. I think that was a really thorough response. So onward and upward.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about determining the model you're going to offer. So if we go on to the next slide. So the service model is going to be a little bit different than just what services you're going to provide. Obviously you want to take a look at prioritizing your services, as Kimberly said, based on the value. If you're looking at a team that sort of does all the marketing and all the proposals too in one place, you may have a deadline to get out your monthly company newsletter. But if you've got a proposal that's due on the same day, I think we all know what the right choice is as far as which one you're going to be working on, right? Same thing, if you've got, a website update that needs to be done for the corporate website, the same day that a client presentation is due, we all know you're going to be working on that slide deck for the client presentation, right? Because we all got to be about winning work. But when we look at this, if you look within the proposal space and think about prioritizing that there, we've come up with different ways that we try to figure out like what is it our team is going to be doing. One of those things is really around what type of work is cross-functional. And the reason we've identified that is because we find that one of the roles that the proposal team has served very well has been in bringing different parts of the company together. It is very common right now that you've got companies that have sort of formed by mergers and acquisitions. A lot of companies going through a lot of rapid growth where people don't really know each other. And especially the proposal managers who've been with the company for a long time, you are so good at answering questions like, where do I go to for this? Who is our expert on that? Who can I ask if I need to find out what we did for this client? And so answering some of those cross-functional questions and helping to bring these teams together, I think really should always be something that we look at as core to our job, even if it's not written in any job description.
Yeah, absolutely. Just an example of like a real life example is when we were evaluating like what value does our team provide, what work can be cross-functional. We were implementing a content management system, RFPIO, and we realized that there were other departments within our organization that could also use that system, which would cut down on like time for them, time and resources for them, as well as time and resources for us. And so we really prioritized implementing that and getting the content uploaded into that system so that it did provide a lot of value to our team, but that value was increased because of the value it provided for other teams as well. Yeah, and it built trust and connectivity between departments even.
Great. Let's go on to the next one and talk about some of the things that you want to consider as well, and what you offer. We all know that the ability to provide work beyond proposals and even the ability to scale up what we provide for our proposals is, a big factor to that is volume. If you've got 3 proposals coming into your department in a month and you've got a team of 5 people, you're probably going to have a lot more time that you can support client services or the marketing deliverables that need to be done. But if you've got that same team of 5 and you've got 50 proposals coming in, you're probably not going to have time to do much more beyond proposals. So taking a look at the volume of work, and there's a lot of metrics that go into that too. It's not just how many proposals, but what goes into each proposal. Are they quick turn proposals with standard responses that you can pull out of your content management system or pull off the shelf? Or are they complicated multi-volume proposals where you've got to provide a technical approach and past performance and pricing? Those are all going to weigh on how much work you're able to do. Of course, talked about the number of staff, the skills on your team. You may want to offer graphic design work for your proposals, but if you don't have people who really have deep design expertise, it's going to be hard, and you might want to reconsider that. Do you need to offer more than, say, a cover and an org chart if you don't have somebody who's really comfortable in design programs? You may want to see if they've got somebody on their team who can provide those services. A lot of groups like planners and architects and even some data scientists are really good at creating their own graphics. And if they can do that better than the proposal team can, then maybe we let them do that. Do you have the ability to outsource? That's a big consideration to the services you're going to offer. You may have a group of consultants that you regularly turn to, but what's your role going to be in that? Are you going to be responsible for interviewing them, screening them, giving them computers, managing their workload, providing quality control of their work? The more you're expected to do to sort of manage that outsourced staff, the more time it's going to take away from you. You also want to think about, to what degree are you able to make decisions about what work you're supporting? I have worked in some places where I've been able to take a look at debriefs from past jobs and say, we lost this the last 4 times and we don't have anything to offer that's different this time. So my team's not going to support this, and I suggest you no-go it. Um, I don't think I have that ability to do that where I am right now, and not everybody feels as confident in doing that. So if you feel like you have to take on everything that comes your way, then you need to make sure that you've got resources available to take those. And, don't let them do things like client work or website design if that's going to take them away from that mandatory proposal work. Finally, you want to take a look at what you are accountable for as opposed to what your internal clients are accountable for. What I mean by that, as a head of a proposal department, I feel like ultimately I am accountable for the quality and the compliance of the proposals that are done by my proposal team, which means I'm going to make sure that somebody is looking over everything and checking them twice at the end, even if I've got the best proposal manager in my team managing the process. So if I were working for a team where I didn't have that accountability and I knew, say, the partner was going to be looking over everything and checking, I may not, apply that additional level of resource, but it's important to know who is accountable at the end for not just delivering on time, but for the overall quality and compliance.
Yeah, Tracy, I just want to say, like, I hope everybody really appreciates what an excellent nugget of wisdom that was, because if you're trying to get into the management roles in these organizations, understanding what your lane looks like because people will try to constantly expand your lane, right? Like,
Mhm.
you need to be responsible for X, Y, Z, and then now ABC and DEF, right? Like, I think there's that scope creep that kind of like jumps into our environments on so many occasions. And so I love how you just said that, being accountable, what we're accountable versus what our organization or what the department is accountable for, right? Like I really want to emphasize that, because I think that nugget of wisdom is extremely important for the folks that are listening.
Great. So now define in a bit more detail what you're going to support. And this can also help you in terms of managing your workload and sort of setting out what those boundaries are going to be. One of the best things that I've seen anybody do was at AECOM, there was a group who said, you know what, we have to manage our workload. And so because we're not going to be able to hire more people to support all these requests, we're going to cut out the noise. And we're going to cut out the noise by telling everybody, if 50% of the time available to respond has already elapsed before you come to us, we are not helping you. So if you've got an RFP that's been sitting on your desk for 2 weeks and it's due in 2 more weeks, goodbye. And I think that is excellent. And I am about to put that in writing here as well. Along with the time to or from the RFP release, you might want to also think about time before the RFP release. For a large pursuit that is very complicated, has multiple volumes, has pricing and all of those things, you need to not be responding after the RFP came out, but be working on that before. And so, we're looking at another set of boundaries here in terms of these like really big pursuits over, 50 million. If you have not come to us 30 days before the RFP is released, we're going to have problems too. When it comes to scope, you can take a look at, again, what is your group responsible for? And this could apply if you're one proposal team out of many in a large organization, or just a small team within a small organization. But are there certain types of clients or certain types of services that are a priority? For example, if you are working for a smallish tech firm and you happen to do some change management consulting on part of a couple of large tech implementations, and now your team has decided, oh, hey, let's go after some change management jobs. Are those really your core competency that your company is trying to stake your name on or not? Are they just sort of ancillary services that you've done because, it came up? We really should be making sure that we're prioritizing our time on what our company's core services are, unless it is a defined area of growth. And that goes down to relation to the growth strategy.
Just to add, can I jump in
Yeah.
and add one thing? It's just, it's also like the core products or services that your company provides. It's also what the RFP is asking for.
Mhm.
Like those two things have to match, or you have to decide what the level of matchness is probably for that individual RFP or for your department. But I have found it to be a really key metric that we had included is like, what is the RFP actually looking for? And does that match our core competencies?
Exactly. And I I had a really good example of that where we had an RFP from a local county government, and it was one of those kitchen sink, service things. And we were very strong in one of the 12 scope areas, but only one of the 12. Should we really be going after that as a prime? That's another way to look at priority services. When you've got an effort that is cross-functional or cross-geography, it really benefits from having somebody from the central proposal group involved. Again, you've got a better picture of the company, you've got a better picture of the services that cross the different boundaries and can provide a lot more value to those types of pursuits as well. We've seen some proposal teams that will only support proposals with a defined scope, and they don't support the MSAs or umbrella contracts. We've seen some proposal teams where they only do the large umbrella contracts, and then the task orders underneath them have to be done by the client service team. And then if you're in a large company, they tend to have larger task orders under those umbrella contracts or MSAs. So that's where you see a lot of proposal teams do both, but it's something you want to look at. And then finally, cost. Sometimes we use cost as a way to, not quite as a minimum bar, but the bigger you get, the more cost needs to be important. And so we are looking at, in certain markets, a proposal needs to be a certain dollar amount, or it's going to be low on our priority list, unless the team can point to how it is directly related to and supporting our growth strategy. So say we have a minimum standard where our team is not going to support a state government bid unless it's at least $1 million. Well, if it's 500,000, but it is the first of its kind in a market that we're trying to grow into, and thus supports our strategic vision, that might get an exception. So these are all things that it helps for you to think about, get approval from your leadership, get approval from your sales team, get buy-in from the executives. And if you can sort of define these sorts of things, it can really go a long way in terms of helping your internal clients know what you're going to support and what you're not. And that can help you by limiting the number of times you have to say no, because if people see that, the request is going to be out of scope, they, some of the time they won't even bother you with it.
Joy has a really good comment in the chat saying, it's nice to hear this. So, you're not the crazy one for saying and pushing for these things. These are battles I've had to fight too hard and too long. And I think a lot of us, I do want to say here that I think it's really important that we're distinguishing between just a go, no go and what the department does. So as a manager, figuring out how to define what do we do, I think it's important to clarify that there's a big distinction between go, no go and what proposal team does. So and you've done that really, really well here, and to Joy's point as well. So
thank you. So then the next thing that we're sort of talking about internally now is how are we going to define a tiered model of service? Because we don't have people who can support everything. So where do we draw those lines? So, and what do those lines mean you're going to get? So if we're going to say, you know, everybody over a certain dollar amount or other bids that support our strategic growth vision is going to get full service. Well, what does that mean? Okay, so that's probably going to mean they're going to be assigned a dedicated capture manager. They're going to get a dedicated proposal manager. And if it's large enough, maybe a coordinator as well. They will have support with writing and editing, graphic design, desktop publishing. If there are orals involved, they will get people involved to help them develop the orals content and coaching them on how to present. They will also get quality control and peer reviews, both by the proposal team from the compliance and content standpoint, as well as from their business segment. At the opposite end, for those that really don't meet the bar for support, we're going to point them to a library of templates, a library of graphics, and, you know, a set of content that we've got, and say, we wish you well. You know, if you've got questions, I can answer them, but I cannot prepare this for you. Now, where we always struggle is, you know, the ones that really are top tier and deserve full service are usually pretty obvious, right? It's a big dollar amount. It's going to be a big deal to the company. Maybe it's a recompete for a contract that's kept 20% of your staff busy for the past 5 years. You know, those are going to be obvious. The ones that are self-service tend to be obvious too, but what's not is, what do you do for all of those in the middle? And that's where we typically see the most struggle. And what I'm trying to put into place is to almost have like a scope of work, a project or proposal intake form that we can use, where the proposal manager can use that as a tool to negotiate with the capture team who's coming in with this request. And so you've got your list of, here's all of the sort of like full service things that we offer. Let's talk about which ones we can do and which ones you need to do. And if there's a gap and there's no one who can do those things, then let's talk about which things we might need to outsource. But highly recommend having this discussion prior to the kickoff, like as soon as that RFP comes in the door, because if you can have this discussion, clarify who's doing what, especially what you're not doing, get this documented in writing, and have this memorialized on your team site, in your Google Workplace, on your SharePoint site, wherever all your proposal files live, that will go a long way to heading off problems down the road when people say, oh, well, I thought the proposal team always does this. And you say, nope, I checked the box right here. And look, here's your name that says you are going to be responsible for final editing. You are going to be responsible for QC reviews. So this is sort of how we're planning to move forward with our tiered approach here.
Real quick question here for Kimberly, because I know you and I have talked on some occasions about how to implement a tiered model like what Tracy is describing. There's lots of conversation around this. As someone who is considering bringing this on board but doesn't have it quite yet, what are the things that you're thinking about as you try to scale your team? Or what do you feel confident about? What do you feel nervous about as you see these tiered models, so that, maybe some of the folks who are in your same situation could sympathize?
Yeah. I think the biggest question I ask myself is how to get buy-in from that leadership team that has to kind of sign off on this, right? Like that's really my first step in thinking about a tiered service model is how do I get that buy-in? How do I create the value for them to buy into this? Are we going, and we cover this also a little bit more of just like some of those statistics, like some of those points, like know your audience and know what value it is that would appeal to them.
Mm-hmm.
So building value, building buy-in for, whoever has to sign off on this above you. And then building value for your team. Like you can open it up to them. You can ask them for their input, what they think. I mean, advise maybe like starting out with a rough sketch, right? Like having a rough draft to provide a framework to provide them with, but create buy-in from your team also by asking their input and what they think. And I think in those conversations, you can kind of maybe break down some self-limiting beliefs that they also have. So an example of this is we are in the process of kind of creating this tiered service model for ourselves internally. One question that we do ask is about references. It's really important in our space to have reliable references. So if we don't, or we can't write to that, then it is a stopping point for us. So I had a writer bring a deal to me, and our references maybe weren't the best, but we were able to write around that and to prove the relevancy of those references in that deal. And they ended up winning the deal. Like we ended up winning the deal. And so it helped break down some of their self-limiting beliefs about like their writing ability, because we walked through it. We talked through it, like how can they write to this? So not to go off on a tangent, but I think how do you create buy-in for leadership? How do you create buy-in from your team? And then your next step is really like, how are you going to create buy-in from the sales team? Or I think, Tracy, the term you used was capture team. So I think creating buy-in, right, is a really important factor.
Yeah, and that's great advice, because we can talk all day about about the technical aspects of this, like why it's useful, why it's helpful, and like we're all bought in, right? Like, yeah, hey, we don't want to spend time doing work that doesn't matter, right? But how do we communicate that to the people who are going to help us do our job well? That's a sticking point for me, and so I think it's really helpful to understand like how y'all are thinking about that and where you need to make those connections to introduce something like this. So thank you for clarifying.
So we can go on to the next slide, because there's a little bit of overlap between this question and sort of what we're talking about here with the buy-in. And, you know, I have witnessed just this weekend, you know, when you have things go south on a big pursuit, use that as an opportunity. And what I mean by that is we had a team that had a $150 million pursuit that they're working on over the weekend, and they were complaining because they didn't have the graphic support they needed. And it turned out that's because the graphics team was spending too much time on these smaller pursuits that really were not worth the effort and the spin. And this is proving to be a great opportunity for me to show leadership. This is exactly why we need this model. We should not be putting $100 million proposal at risk for something that's, you know, for two pursuits that are $500,000, right? So we are going to be using this exactly as one of our examples to go get that buy-in. So now, if your leadership isn't on board with the tiered model, you know, that happens, you know, it's not failure. Okay, look at what you need to do next. If they're not going to accept a tiered level of service, then you need to make the case for more support. So gather your data. You know, you want to start building up metrics. How many pursuits has your team been doing over a certain period of time? What's the value of those? If you can get it, what's the dollar amount that was spent on those proposals, not only by the proposal team, but also by the consulting team or the product team? How many hours were worked? How have those proposals contributed to your company's growth targets? Who else has been involved? Kimberly, I know you had some things you wanted to weigh on in here.
I mean, it was really just back to this, when you're deciding on these kind of metrics to present, know your audience. What metrics will be important to them, right? Like, again, and that kind of goes into the organizational structure. Like, who do you report? What department, and who do you report up to? And then just also, what other departments are involved, and like, do they also have these bandwidth issues? Can you get buy-in from other departments to go with you to support this tiered model, who will also, you know, as much support as you can get in some of, you know, proposing an idea, like proposing a tiered model of support, the more successful you'll likely be.
All right, I see we've got a time
Yes.
crunch now. We've got 10 minutes left. You want to,
Yeah,
we should pick up the pace.
here's just just an example of a bid no bid process. And like Catherine also pointed out, like it can be a tool, and it's kind of, there's what your department does as a whole, and then there's kind of like questions you ask for individual bids. So just to highlight, and we'll keep going, because this is, developing your staff is really important.
All right, so who's on your team? You've got a team of people, and they're not robots, and their skills are going to be different, their interests are going to be different. And you know, the probably the most valuable thing that I've learned is that your staff will be happier and more enthusiastic about your work if you can design their work and their position around what they like and what they're good at. So you may have somebody who's really well organized and a great communicator. Sounds like a great proposal manager. You know, you may have somebody on your team who's been managing proposals, but you know, he kind of likes to be off in a room by himself. He's got a really good eye for detail, but sometimes when he's managing proposals, he gets stuck in the weeds. You know, maybe you assign him his job as your lead writer. And then, you know, Jane is super talkative and she's a creative genius, and, you know, maybe she's not as well organized and, you know, able to lead a proposal, but, you know, she could have the potential to be your best designer and your creative director who can work with the technical solution teams to help develop their infographics and really help tell that story and provide the core messaging. Like, you don't need to have 3 people who are only proposal managers who only do the same thing. Next slide. So one of the other things I found is that it's really critical to keep your team engaged and motivated if you can provide them a career framework. A lot of smaller companies don't always have this. A lot of larger companies all have one that is very similar. But it's pretty, from a high level, every company will have some sort of job levels that corresponds to their salary bands, which probably has minimum expectations for years of experience, education, that kind of thing. If you're big enough to have multiple tracks, you can have more than just the proposal track, and you can have a track for people to develop within graphic design or within writing. And these are just a few examples of roles that people could fill in. You know, this is not proprietary. Feel free to borrow this and use it as you like, but just giving people expectations for what's required to advance from one step to the next can help them in a couple of different ways. Again, it can help keep their eye on the ball in terms of how they want to develop. It keeps the promotion concern down in terms of, like, people are wondering, why did Jane get promoted and I didn't? Well, Jane has clearly demonstrated she met the skills for that next level. And I saw there was a question, why did I have a copy editor down at that level? Purely just based on the skill sets of the people that I have currently on my team, who are a couple years out of school, don't have a lot of proposal or technical experience. And so that just happens to be where they're starting.
Yeah, and just the tidbit I would add here is, if you are in the process of establishing a framework, a career framework, or a team as a whole, build for the team that you want. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to necessarily be what your organization has capacity for at that moment, but build for the team that you build this framework out for the team that you want. And you can always grow into it. All
right, so let's talk about training, you know, and there's no shortage of proposal specific training out there. You guys all know where to find it. You can find it here at PI, among many other places. But what I want to suggest here is that as you're working with your team on how they want to develop them themselves, you talk about other areas beyond just the process of managing proposals. So you may want to get them involved in the sales process. They may want to look at more technical training related to the tools they use. They may want to get involved in creative writing or design. If they're at a certain level, maybe they're aspiring to be a proposal manager, but they're not there yet. You might want to sign them up for some sort of leadership development program. If you're one person who's really deeply involved with supporting a specific technical area, you might want to send that person to get some technical training. You may want to send them to get training in agile project management, for example. Some people may be interested more in public speaking, meeting facilitation, but the message is there's a lot of ways that people can develop. It doesn't have to be just around their day-to-day job. So give them that freedom to explore.
Yeah,
and Kimberly, you have a good story at your firm about that.
so some companies, our company, we're fortunate, provides professional development funds for each person at the company. And so I really encourage my team to pursue things even outside of direct proposal training, right? So for example, we have one writer on our team that is like an experienced creative writer and published poet. And so we've encouraged them to pursue that, even like they're allowed to, they can use some of their professional development funds for like creative writing workshops. And I mean, essentially you're supporting a core competency of proposals, right? Writing, creative writing, and they're enjoying themselves and building up not just their proposal skills, but also just life skills also. So it feels like a win-win for everybody.
Agreed. So beyond training, there's a lot of other opportunities that you can provide your staff to help them grow. You can assign them to some sort of internal project. Maybe it's rewriting your job descriptions, developing training in something. Ask them to lead training for other people who are new to proposals. If you have something that you're tasked with by your boss, maybe have one of your employees do a first draft that you can sit down and review with them. Loan them out to another team. If you've got a proposal you're working on where you're in a new joint venture, maybe let them collaborate with another company and start to build a relationship and figure out ways they can do it better. Get them involved with networking groups and get them involved with PI for sure. I know we've got just a couple minutes left, so I'm just going to go to how we define success. There's a lot of different ways that you can look at success for your team. Most often we see people looking at capture rates and win rates, but I want to say you also need to consider company growth. Is the work that you're doing contributing to the growth of your overall company? Do your people have work-life balance, or do you have a lot of staff turnover? What is the feedback you're getting from your internal customers? Are you getting more internal customers? And are you getting more external customers? But at the end of the day, if your team is successful, your staff will likely be much more satisfied with their career and their place within your organization and be likely to stick around. So we've got 2 minutes left for questions. Thank you all so much.
I don't see any questions, but I would love to read part of Joy's comment here. She left a really thorough assessment of what's been going on here, talking about how she's been laid off, and like hearing about what's been going on in the industry, and just saying that this was a really refreshing webinar to help advance your skills as the manager and think about things differently. So obviously, your presentation has provided a new perspective for some folks here today. So thank you. To the
Excellent.
team. Okay, and it looks like so in this last minute, Kimberly and Tracy, you are comfortable with folks contacting you. It looks like obviously information is
Yep.
included here. What's
Yep.
the best place? Are y'all LinkedIn, email, phone? Like, what do you prefer?
LinkedIn or email is good for me.
Yeah,
Okay.
LinkedIn or email. If you want to text me, you can. If you call me, I'll probably not answer because I think you're offering me a car loan.
Yes.
Got to be careful of those spam filters. That's fair. So thank you so much. Part of what I'm so excited about with these presentations is that we often talk about the hard skills that go into proposals, but we don't often talk about how do I get buy-in from my leaders to try something new? Or even, I think part of what excites me about this presentation is just knowing that there are managers out there who care if their employees are having a good time. And I really want everybody to be able to take that away from this, because in our industry, so often that's not the case. And we've given two really great examples of managers here who care about your development, who care about your work-life balance, who care about being able to advance you forward in a way that makes sense. And I want everybody to have that hope that this is possible in the industry. We are at the top of our hour. So just a reminder that we do have another Wednesday webinar coming up next week, where we'll be talking about how to do proposal and sales from an introvert's perspective with one of our very great friends, Red Staffstrom, who's an excellent sales trainer. He's written a full curriculum on sales for introverts specifically, so that we can maybe additionally gain some more skills as proposal team members in the direct sales space. As always, we are so pleased to have you join us here at PI, and we're happy to continue that conversation at proposalindustryexperts.com, where you can find folks like Kimberly and Tracy dropping those big knowledge bombs on the regular. So we're happy to see you there. Again, thank you for joining us today. This recording will be available both on the Zoom link and through YouTube within the next week. So please don't be shy. We're happy to have you watch this again, distribute it as often as you'd like, and we'll see you during our next session. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.